Feel free to use the chat box throughout the training. We'll be monitoring the chat box to address questions during the question and answer session at the end of the training. CLE approval is pending from the Washington State Bar. We kindly request that you complete the evaluation at the end of the training. Training materials and resources can be found on the WICS website where you registered. With that, I will turn it over to our honored presenter, Judge Wahwassuck.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start out and I want to introduce myself again. And I appreciate that, the introduction, and that's a lot of what I do, but who we are is really important. And so before I begin, I want to introduce myself and say, Puju Sibikwan and Dekas, Kigos Natodem, Iguin Gom Kashamnado, Iguin Dinwin Mongdaduk. And I said, I'm called Sibikwan and I'm Fish Clan. And I want to thank the one who made everything for bringing us up to this now. And I think that's really important to think about all of our experiences. So I'm going to, as I begin, I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully I've got this the right way here. All right. And so it's hard when we have this many people on and we're doing this virtually to do group exercises, but I want to try something here. And I think it's really important to all sort of to think about ourselves and who we are. And that's why I start off like that. So we're all in the honor system here. So I'm going to have everybody close your eyes. And I want you to just think back about 150 years, 200 years. What's your family's history? Where did you come from? Did your family immigrate here? Are you a member of a tribal nation? What's your family's history? Do you own land? Are you people that have moved around a lot? What's your family's experience? You can open your eyes now. And the reason that I say that, it's very important because we all look at the world through the lens of our own personal experience. And that's why I use that introduction, that word GOM. It's everything that's happened up to this now. And so we're all products of that experience. And so our perspectives are different. And it's important to keep that in mind when we go forward, because we don't all see things the same. We don't all have the same experience. We all have a little bit different perspective, but that's what brings richness to this work. And so when you think about why you're here, what for learning about joint jurisdictional courts, things that you want to look at when you're deciding whether or not you want to create a joint jurisdictional court where you are, goals might be addressing impact of substance use and the needs that face tribal members, families, and the community, to determine how interjurisdictional agreements can better help you with your needs that face tribal communities and their neighboring communities. So really, we need to ask ourselves what we do to heal the whole community, and what are the long-term benefits for working together? Are there cost savings across all systems that we might be able to achieve by working together? And then the important question of how do you develop that collaboration within agencies and across jurisdictions? So those are some of the questions that that we need to think about as we go forward here. I like to start off with this picture when this was in 2008, as you can see, and this is when we had a joint powers signing and installed the Leech Lake tribal flag in all of the courtrooms in Itasca County. And that's my family. My son there is in blue. We're going to hear a little bit more later from him. And he's smudging off all of the judges before we go in. And the woman that he's standing in front of is the Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court now. And so we really were able to bring together a lot of different partners in our work. And I want to tell you about our journey. Okay, so joint jurisdiction is exercise. Is that coming through good? Okay. So jurisdiction is exercised jointly when a tribal court judge and a state court or a federal court judge come together to exercise their jurisdiction, their respective authorities simultaneously. So you bring together your justice system partners and you leverage resources to promote and protect public safety and promote healing. And so really, when you think about it, the way I like to look at it is that you're bringing all the tools of the state system and all the tools of the tribal system together to create a safety net. And really, you're exercising the jurisdiction that you currently have and bringing that together. And it's not just healing to wellness or drug or DWI courts. And I think that's what it's important to know, that really this is on a spectrum from cases where some jurisdictions might just want to do a cooperative agreement, maybe a transfer and work collaboratively that way, all the way up to full-blown joint jurisdiction. So we'll talk more about those programs. So when we started, a lot of times people say, well, that will never work where we are, because it would be like trying to pound square pegs into a round hole, because the systems are very different. And that's what we found. And we represent the tribal court system with that yellow circle, and then the blue square represented the state court system. They seem very different when you look at the approaches and the history of both systems. And that seems like they would be very different. But when you start to look at common goals, and this is what we did when we began, is we looked at what we were trying to do in reducing disproportionate minority contact. We wanted fewer children in out-of-home placement. We wanted to address drug and alcohol abuse and the issues that was causing, and reduce the number of DWIs and traffic fatalities. So when we were beginning, these were some of the goals that both the tribal court and the state court, we both wanted to achieve that. We might have had different approaches, but we both were trying to achieve those goals. So we found that when you start to look at these issues or goals through this lens of common goals, then you can really see that there's a lot more areas that you can work together than there are differences. And so it really provides a lot of opportunity for collaboration and for creating joint programming. So I think it's important to sort of know where we began and how things have developed, because this is an ongoing journey. And I'm sure it's the same there where you are as it is here, that, you know, these issues don't stop at the reservation boundary. These are, you know, we have community members that live on the reservation and also live in the surrounding communities. And so we really took this approach that there's not jurisdictional boundaries that stops these issues. And so we need to work together. And by way of background, this shows Minnesota's 9th Judicial District, where I am, and we're over here in Itasca County. There's 4 reservations that are within the 9th Judicial District, and as you can see, it's huge. It covers almost the entire top half of the state, so the geography is a lot to overcome in working together. And so Minnesota is a public law 280 state, and despite all of our efforts, Native Americans are still overrepresented in the juvenile and the adult justice systems. I think this statistic's a little bit old here, but you know, over 20% of incarcerated youth are Native American that are in placements. And so both for juveniles and adults, the disparity figures are still pretty stark. And so this was the situation when we began. Some other things in Minnesota that are important to keep in mind of why we work together, that Native American population is around 2% in the state of Minnesota, but you can see the percentage of arrests and the people that are on probation in northern Minnesota and people in the 9th Judicial District. It's incredible, the disparities that continue. And so it's really important that we continue working together. So this was kind of the lay of the land when we got started. Cass County, when we began, they had seen between 2000 and 2005 or so, they had seen a 21% increase in felony DWIs and had really bad outcomes for children in the state. And they really some of the worst outcomes. And so we had the dubious distinction Cass County did for being first for sexually active teens. Out-of-home placements were second, and attempted suicides, drinking and driving, children living in poverty. That was the situation in Cass County. In Itasca County, things weren't much better. In 2004, there were increase in jail costs that we were seeing in Itasca County, and methamphetamine was a huge issue and continues to be. As you can see, the number of people that were booked in that their cases involved meth was really stark. So that was the lay of the land in the state system. The Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe Tribal Court was created in the 1970s, handled conservation cases, and incrementally added. So the equal cases were added in the 80s, in 1980. And then by 2006, when I started in Leech Lake Tribal Court, we were handling civil traffic conservation, these typical cases that a lot of tribal courts do. I was hired, and my charge was to grow the court and to expand what we were able to have a hand in. And so we didn't have criminal codes. Leech Lake basically was all of the cases, because it was a public law 280 state, the criminal cases were all going through state court, and the tribe didn't have any say or any hand in healing for those cases. We did have some good things going on. We had interactive video conferencing that we were able to use and some technology as we grew. So we were in a good position to partner. And I think that it's important. A lot of people that I talked to early on, there was the perception from some people from the tribal end of things that this was giving up some power, or it was they were giving up sovereignty by working collaboratively with the state district courts. And I love this quote, Leo Brisbois from White Earth. He is a federal magistrate, but he said that the execution of the joint powers agreements between the tribal court and state district courts are an important example of how broader intergovernmental relations can begin to come full circle back to that of co-equal sovereigns. So really our tribal courts are one of the most visible exercises of tribal sovereignty. And so by working together, it really is an exercise in sovereignty. So at Leech Lake, things grew. And I want to talk about some of the programming that we began. And this will give you an example of some of the different types of exercises of joint jurisdiction and interjurisdictional collaboration. So our program at Leech Lake was called Bamanim Anishinabeg, which in Ojibwe means care for the people. That was our umbrella for all the programming. We had our adult wellness or DWI and drug courts. We created a juvenile diversion program, a juvenile delinquency program, and juvenile reentry. And so we'll go through each of those. Our wellness courts, the DWI and drug courts, we have a state district court judge and a tribal court judge that actually take the bench together. And so we brought both systems together to create this third entity of the joint jurisdictional court. And so we also we follow the key components for drug and DWI courts. So we have the public defender, the county attorney, Department of Corrections and county probation provide supervision in the courts, and law enforcement's provided by the county sheriffs and the police department, Leech Lake Police. They also assist. And then we have treatment providers from Leech Lake and also private treatment providers. And coordination is provided through the 9th Judicial District and county probation. And again, we were the first joint tribal state courts in the nation. When we started, we thought surely someone had to be doing this because it just made sense to work together. And we found that when we started, we sort of were the model, and there wasn't anything that was happening like this. But we went ahead and we knew that this would create better outcomes and help all of us, both systems, achieve their goals. And so we began to work together. So the Cass County and Leech Lake Wellness Courts, the Leech Lake Cass County program was created in 2006. And then Itasca County followed almost a year to the day later. We signed a joint powers agreement between Leech Lake and Itasca County. And we were, again, the goals were to address alcohol-related crashes, deaths in Cass County, and methamphetamine abuse in Itasca County. And it's important to note that our clients in both programs, our participants are tribal members and non-Indians. And I think that really shows the fact that we're a community and there's differences, but people go back and forth. And so our programs are open to both tribal members and non-Indians. They truly are multi-jurisdictional and multi-agency. So we have the different divisions in the tribe that participate, and we have a county, state representatives, different agencies that participate. And it's important to note, as I said, we were the model in Cass County and Leech Lake. And so we didn't have anything in writing. We went to training and things like that, but we took the Nike approach, as they say, and we just did it. And we operated on a handshake for over a year. And until other jurisdictions started to look at what we were doing to say, maybe we'd like to try that. And then people would say, well, can we get a copy of your MOU and your foundational documents? And I was like, well, then we decided we should put something in writing. And as far as our joint jurisdiction agreement, and that joint jurisdiction agreement was all of 52 words, 7 lines. We agreed to exercise our jurisdiction, our authority simultaneously toward a set of common goals where we could. That's all it is. And then we'll talk more, there's other foundational documents that we use that expanded on that, but that's the basic document that the courts continue to operate all these years later. Our wellness court teams, and we went through this, I think I have a similar slide here. So it's, basically the typical DWI or what Healing to Wellness court team. It's just tribal and state working together. So one of the things that we also were able to expand to, and we did this as kind of an offshoot of our Healing to Wellness court, was we created a family drug court or family healing to wellness court. And we had a lot of our participants that were involved in the child protection system in both, they could have cases that were pending in both tribal court and state court. And so transfers going back and forth, it could really be difficult for people. And so we created this separate track for people that had family members and really took more of a family healing to wellness court approach. And again, that was also open to tribal members and non-Indians that lived on the reservation. And participants came in through the joint jurisdiction wellness court, and then this separate track was created for people that had their child protection issues as well. And then we were able, that worked so well that we expanded into a juvenile diversion program. And so with our diversion program, again, it was open to tribal members and non-Indians that lived on or near the reservation. And in tribal court, and part of the reason I always go back to this, that part of my charge was to grow the court, and we didn't have a lot of resources, like a lot of tribal courts. You know, our funding was fairly limited. I didn't have anybody to really supervise. So if I had cases, juvenile cases that came through tribal court, I didn't have anybody to follow up to make sure that people were complying or following my orders. And so what we were able to do through our juvenile diversion program is to work with Cass County probation, and their probation, since a lot of these cases might have originated or they were also working with the family and the youth in Cass County, we did a cross appointment order. And I was able to appoint Cass County probation officers to provide supervision under a cross appointment order. It didn't cost the tribe anything. And basically they provided that supervision to us. They were already working with these families and youth. And so it was just an extension of what they were able to do to help us. And we created a diversion board, like a lot of courts, state courts have diversion programs, and Cass County did. So for first-time juvenile offenders, they would go to the diversion program. And it didn't have the greatest success. And so, you know, people would come in and they would go through their diversion. And if they didn't, then it would go back through regular court. But their statistics for recidivism were not the greatest. And so we created our own diversion board, and we had elders, we had someone from the tribal police, we had someone from our Bamana Anishinaabe team that was on the diversion board. And we used a circle format, with our team and the family. And really, we came in and problem solved together. And this was a great example of how we were able to integrate tribal custom and to really help with these diversion programs. What we would do is we'd have the youth come in with a parent. And so we would give them, we had posters that had the Anishinaabe values, called them the 7 grandfathers. And so they were given when we would come in and talk about what brought them, you know, what the issue was that brought them in front of the diversion board. And then we would send them home with that poster. They would have to come back and they would have to do a presentation on one of those values. They could pick any one. You know, there are things like respect and honesty and, you know, and things that it's a benefit for anyone. But it was amazing what people would come back with. And we told them they could come back and present to us any way they want. They could present as a story, or they could draw a picture. We got some pretty amazing things. And it was also a teaching tool. People really learned about themselves and their own family as part of this. And it worked, as you'll see in a moment, that with our statistics, our diversion program really saw a lot lower recidivism. And that worked really well. So we ended up getting a grant and did a more delinquency program to address those cases. As I said, I didn't have anyone that could really handle the limited number of cases that I didn't have any supervision ability really, other than my orders. I didn't have anyone to follow up. And so with our delinquency programming, the cases would begin in Cass County District Court, or they could start in Leech Lake Tribal Court, either one. And then the courts worked together under that joint powers agreement that I referenced. Again, there was just a set of common goals that we were working, and this fell right underneath there. And so Leech Lake was able to exercise really expanded jurisdiction over parents, that's something that in state court here, it's really, we're limited as far as what we can do for ordering parents to do things in state court, because it's all focused on the behavior of the youth. And so in tribal court, I was able to use my additional powers that I had through tribal court to be able to do these individualized service plans and to exercise jurisdiction over the parents to make sure that they were doing things. As we've all known, we send kids off to treatment sometimes and they come back, nothing's changed at home. And so they don't have a lot of chance for success when they come back in. And so we were able to have our case manager provide services. And so we had a team that we put together that would provide wraparound services. And the supervision was provided under that cross appointment order. So that was another example of the way we were able to use our joint powers agreement and exercise joint jurisdiction. That worked so well that we expanded from there. And a lot of our kids, because they were being sent off either to treatment or if they were sent to a facility where they needed to be out of home, then we started planning as soon as they left. And so again, the cases could start in state court or tribal court. And our target were youth that were involuntarily in inpatient treatment or detention facility. And so Cass County Probation worked with us. They provided a risk needs assessment and then provided that information to our case management team. And then we had a wraparound care coordinator and advocates that would begin working with that whole family even before a youth was placed. And then they would continue working with them while they were away, and then kind of have a warm welcome when they came back to continue providing those services. And so that was another way that we were able to exercise our jurisdiction jointly on those reentry cases. So as you can see, things just built incrementally. That we picked one thing that would work, which was our DWI court. And it worked so well that instead of focusing on things that maybe we couldn't get along on, we focused on one that we could. And I'll tell you that, when we got started, the relationships between Leech Lake and the surrounding counties were not good. Cass County was infamous for fighting all of the tribes' fee to trust applications, and the relationships historically were very bad. But we were able to pick one thing that we could work on, and it really changed the world, not just for our court participants, but in our whole community when we started to work together, and things really grew. It was like planting seeds, and you see this plant and it grows and expands and is healthier, makes things healthier and healthier, not only for the families, but for the courts and for the larger community. And so a lot of things came out of that joint powers agreement. As I said, things started to expand from there. And so we were able to do with a joint powers agreement with the state for police services for Leech Lake Tribal Court. Again, they provided a lot of the supervision and some knock and chats, things like that for added accountability for people. Another thing that I didn't have in tribal court as a tribal court judge was I didn't have guardians ad litem, or some people call them CASAs. I didn't have that. And so that was something we didn't have the funding for. There weren't adequate staff. We just couldn't do it. And so we were able through our joint work to contract with the 9th Judicial District to provide guardian ad litem services. So then we had guardians in tribal court under that contract. And I mentioned earlier that we had an ITV system, or video conferencing, and we were able to get that set up on the same network as the state of Minnesota. And so Leech Lake Tribal Court was able to hook up to any court in the state, to all of the agencies, branches, any place like that had ITV on that system. Leech Lake Tribal Court was also able to hook in. So we were able to offer video visits. A lot of times we had parents that were incarcerated, so we were able to let them come into tribal court and use the ITV. They could have video visits. They could appear for child protection hearings that they weren't able to before. And then we, as part of this, and again, things grew. We had a memorandum of understanding agreement that we put together for both the wellness courts and the restorative justice program. And as part of that, the Leech Lake tribal flags were presented to the boards of commissioners for Cass County and for Itasca County. And the boards started to work together. And that's why I say this really went from the court to the community, because when people started to see the benefits of working together, just on that one thing, things got easier and easier, because then it was like, well, that worked, and so maybe we can try this other thing and work together on that. So the tribal council started having regular meetings with the boards of commissioners for the counties. And so there's tons of road projects that they do together now. And it really was an amazing government to government relations and working together for the good of the whole community. And again, the resources that are available to both systems are not necessarily the same. And so we were able to really leverage what we had through these agreements. And I talked about the cross appointment orders for Cass County for the probation agents. So these agreements just continued. And I have to say that even after all these years, we started in 2006, both courts, they have been in continuous operation. We've had a complete turnover of the judicial staff. We've had team members change, and they have continued without a hitch, because people are really committed to this, and we were able to have something that really worked. And so it's continued to build good relationships in the community between the tribe and their partners. So what were some of the benefits that we saw? We were able to leverage resources. And again, we were, like a lot of tribal courts, dependent on grants, on federal assistance to be able to run a lot of our programming. And so by working together, we were really able to leverage resources, because we were able to sort of tap into some of the things that the state courts had access to. And again, there were resources that the tribe had access to. So we were able to really make that stronger by pooling that when we're working together. So it made new funding sources available. There were new services that were available. And so an example of how new services being available, for instance, in state court, if there was something that they needed to be able to get, to help someone, they couldn't order the tribe to do anything previously, obviously. And but with this, by working together, then it opened up all of those culturally appropriate services that the tribe had for our participants. So we were really able to expand that. And a big one for Leech Lake was the fact that we needed to protect public safety. You saw in the beginning there the issues that were happening. I mean, it was pretty bleak. And we wanted to expand jurisdiction, but we also wanted to heal, because it's not just about completing the case plan or somebody, completing probation. We're trying to heal. And I think that that's something to try to break that cycle of recidivism and to have whole families heal. And so this is something that gave the tribe a hand in doing that. And we're able to work at the same time at protected public safety. And really that us versus them attitude. And I know that tribal state relations, a lot of places have not been good historically. And, I talked a little bit about how things were with Leech Lake and Cass County, but really this brought us together working on a common goal. And it really eliminated a lot of that us versus them, and really looked together as partners of how we could achieve the goals that we both wanted to achieve and make a difference. And services to families became a lot stronger, because if the tribe didn't have it for our participants in the wellness courts or these other joint jurisdiction programs, if the tribe didn't have it, we could probably access something that the state had, and vice versa. Like I say, we're bringing all those tools to create a safety net for the participants. And it really increased public trust and confidence. And that was both for the tribal system and the state system, because a lot of tribal members, and I'm sure that it's the same at Leech Lake as a lot of other places. A lot of people don't necessarily have total confidence in their own tribal courts or their own state courts. And so this is something that Leech Lake tribal members were able to see their court doing something to really make a difference and to promote healing and to make things better in the community. And it really increased trust for tribal members in their own court. And it increased trust and confidence in the tribal system that the state judges had. I'll never forget when Judge Smith, who helped create the first courts with me, Judge Smith from Cass County, he and I did a presentation for judges in Minnesota at one of our annual trainings. And we had Supreme Court justices and we had appellate, district court judges, everyone was there. So we gave them a pop quiz on Indian law. And I'll tell you, they didn't do very well. And I think it was really an eye-opener for people, because when we started to talk about tribal courts and how they operate and who the judges are, the state judges had no idea about the system. They didn't know about Leech Lake Tribal Court. And then when we started to mention who the tribal judges in the 11 tribal, for the 11 tribal nations in Minnesota, the state judges were like, oh, I know her, and I went to law school with him. So they really started to realize that we're serious and we know what we're doing. And so it really increased that confidence in both systems. And again, Leech Lake was able to expand into areas that we weren't covering previously. And really recidivism was lowered, and we were able to stop that revolving door, which is what we set out to do. We had no idea that things would get, go to the level that they have. It's amazing to see. But those are some of the benefits that we saw. And it worked. And by working together, by bringing both systems together, as I said, to create this safety net, we saw amazing success stories. And so when we had participants that were reunited, and again, this may be someone that came in for a DWI, right? Normally they'd be put on probation and serve their probationary time, and then they're off probation, and maybe they come back through or whatever happens. But by working together and really taking this holistic approach and a healing approach, our participants actually, they were able to be reunited if they had a child protection cases. There was healing in whole families. We had people that got their driver's licenses for the first time. There was one participant that we had, I think he was like 32, and he hadn't had a driver's license since he was 16. And so had been, just driving illegally all that time, but he was able to get that. And then seeing people that got jobs and went to school, and even people that graduated our programs that came back to work for the tribe in their addictions and dependency programs, and really bringing that back to the community. And people that were also able to get out of abusive relationships. I know in looking, and we'll talk a little bit more about your tribal state court consortium, but I think that I know that ending abusive relationships and addressing domestic violence is a huge issue everywhere, and something, especially with the jurisdictional lay of the land now. I think that creative ways that you can address domestic violence issues, it's important, because when you have that healing, you can address some of those issues. And then we used to keep track. I used to love to add up all the days of documented sobriety that our participants had. I mean, it might be 15,000 days between our 20 or 30 participants at any given time. It was amazing to see how people how they celebrated that, and how everyone did, because by working together, they were really able to have the support that they needed that they hadn't gotten in the past. And we did see that reduction in recidivism. That's what we set out to do. So with Leech Lake and Cass County, our program, you can see the reduction in recidivism. And so it was as low as 6.6% for Leech Lake and Cass County. And when you look at the Minnesota and national rates for recidivism, it was huge. And our program for juveniles, I said that also was successful. I think the recidivism rate for the youth that were going through Cass County's diversion program, at one point it was upwards of, I think, 36 or 38%. For the families that went through our joint jurisdiction diversion program, the recidivism rate fell to 22 or 23%. So I'm not a statistics person, but they say that's significant. And really we saw this, it's amazing to see the feedback that people had about how they really were starting to address the issues and heal. And so I think that's where you see that recidivism reduction, when people really start to heal. And again, resources are tight these days, and we are able to save millions of dollars in incarceration and out-of-home costs, out-of-home care costs, because again, families were healing. There was safety there, and kids were able to stay home rather than being placed. And so we really saw a lot of success that way by working together. And again, it wasn't just about the people, it was about places and how the things that we were able to do. When we started out in Leech Lake Tribal Court, when I was there, we were in our main facilities building where all of the other tribal programs were and things. And we had, it was in an old, I think back in the day, that was where their tribal council meetings originally were held. And I remember it was, the building had been added on to so many times that it sectioned off. It would be like 85 degrees literally in the courtroom. And so we went from that, and because we were working together, we were able to leverage those resources, and Leech Lake was able to get funding and matching to create a tribal justice center. Then this is a 30,000 square foot tribal justice center that houses the tribal courts. There's 2 courtrooms that are set up. They have facilities for jury. Then also the tribal police facility is there as well. And so it was amazing by working together that we were able to create something like this that's truly a regional center. And today, the Leech Lakes Tribal Justice Center, the probation agents from Cass County meet regularly with their probationers, not even the joint jurisdiction folks, but the probationers that are on their regular caseloads. They're able to come to the Leech Lake Justice Center to meet with clients. And there's a facility that's provided for them so they can do their testing. And it's a convenience for the tribal members and people that are there because they can come right to their own justice center to be able to have those meetings. So it was really an empowering thing to see happen. This is the inside of the court. You can see the courtrooms are there along the hallway. And it's a beautiful facility. So, and things have also progressed throughout the state of Minnesota. I think when we first started, as I said, we were the first, and someone made a comment that the very first program that it was, what did they say? It was that we cracked the door open with the Cass County Leech Lake program, and with Itasca County, we kicked it open for other people to be able to follow in our footsteps. And this is really spreading throughout the state of Minnesota. We're looking at a lot more joint jurisdiction programs where people are really seeing the benefit of this. And down in Hennepin County, they're creating ICWA courtrooms, and they've installed all of the tribal flags for all of the tribal nations in Minnesota. And that when tribal members go to state court, it gives them a sense of pride in knowing that they're recognized to have that. And so it's been amazing to see the results and to see, you know, our tribal court, state court forum, people continuing to work together to see other ways that they can collaborate. So how did we do this? Okay, and I think that it's important to keep in mind. I know we started out and we didn't really have anything in writing, but we do have foundational documents that authorize this, and we were able to move forward. So we had our joint powers agreement, and again, we renewed that just a few years ago, and they didn't change it. I mean, it's 52 words. That's all it is. We're just agreeing to exercise our jurisdiction simultaneously. Then we also had resolutions from the tribal council and the county boards of commissioners that supported our joint work. And then for our team, we have a memorandum of understanding for the team members, and then also with tribal police to be able to do that for specific roles. So, you know, that it spells out what each of the partners does. And then we have interagency agreements that we created, because if it's like where you are, like it was for Leech Lake, there were a lot of silos even among the divisions and the programs in the tribe. And I think it's almost like people, and again, I think part of it gets to a resource issue that they didn't really want to communicate. It's sort of like, these are my clients, and you know, there was a lot of silos there. And we were able to even do an interagency agreement for between our tribal court and human services at Leech Lake and our addictions and dependency program for how we were going to work together internally, and to get that buy-in from tribal council to, I mean, I think it helps to have that, you know, sort of direction from on high. Things are very independent as far as how it runs, but to have tribal council say that they give it the blessing and they expect the division directors to cooperate with things, that really helped a lot. And then with our healing to wellness courts, we have contracts, as I said, where the wellness courts, the adult DWI and controlled substance or drug court, those are both, as I said, they're based on the key components of drug courts and DWI courts. And we have participant contracts and handbooks that we use. So they're voluntary programs. And so it's not something that anyone is made to do. And there was a lot of flexibility in the planning of these, because, for instance, with Cass County, the county attorney's office wanted to make sure that this was a post-conviction for those. They wanted to make sure that people had the DWI conviction. The carrot was that people didn't spend time in jail, and they didn't have the fines, and they had a lot more supervision. And so people know what they're getting into, and they sign these participant contracts. And so they have the option of whether or not they're going to come into the program. And so they know getting into it, what it is involved and who's working together. And so I think that that's something that's really important to keep in mind, is that you can build, if you want to do programming where you are, again, there's a range here, between things that might be like a transfer, like we did with our juvenile programming, where the diversion starts out in Cass County District Court, but then it gets transferred up to the tribes diversion program, all the way up to full joint jurisdictional courts where the two judges take the bench together. And in these days, I would really encourage you too, that we were able to use that interactive video conferencing to link the courts up. Because in the beginning, we would alternate between appearing in tribal court and state court, and people could appear either place. But then we used the ITV, so then we were able to link those courts up. And it really worked well. The judges we would switch places, and I would go to sit in state court, and the Judge Smith would come to tribal court. And that way we got to see everyone. It didn't matter if they were a tribal member or not, where they appeared. That was really up to them and their convenience. And so it was really something we were able, instead of putting things off, if a judge had a conflict for time, it wasn't a problem, because we were able to step right in and work together that way. And really it did become a national model. Again, like I say, the plant kept growing and growing. And these are some of the recognition that joint jurisdiction has received. In 2010, there was a Harvard Honoring Nations Award that we received. Minnesota Corrections Association President's Award, National Association of Drug Court Professionals Cultural Proficiency Courage Award, National Criminal Justice Association Outstanding Criminal Justice Program. We had a Minnesota Association of Counties Award. We had a Local Government Innovation Award in 2017. And then there have been resolutions passed by national organizations such as NADCP, National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, Conference of Chief Justices. It's encouraged to be collaborating. I know that I'm not sure, I didn't check to see the Washington State Court's strategic plan, but I know in Minnesota, the judicial branch, one of the goals is to increase public confidence and trust in the system, and to collaborate. And so it helps to fulfill those state court goals as well. And so today this has grown and grown, and now there are 9 operational joint courts that are handling a variety of cases, working together on adoptions, child abuse and neglect, domestic violence, family law. I mean, it's really the sky's the limit as far as what works locally. And I think that's the key here, is that it doesn't have to be the same everywhere. And throughout Minnesota, the programs are a little bit different. And so it really is what works for you locally. And again, they're also handling criminal cases, felonies, misdemeanors, driving under influence. So it's really, there's a broad range that the courts now are handling the cases. And here's an example from where the model was replicated. St. Regis Mohawk, they have really they're using a supervision model, working together. And so they've done something that's less than 2 judges taking the bench together. So it's using their Bail Reform Act there. They were able to have St. Regis Mohawk provide some of that supervision, pretrial supervision, so tribal members don't sit in jail. And then in Wisconsin, the Ho-Chunk Nation in Jackson County was doing work together. We'll talk a little bit about our pilot sites, but Shingle Springs Band of Miwok and El Dorado County in California was the first pilot site that Project Team worked with. And what they focused on were kids that were truant from school. And so they focused on that, and same model, basically, 2 judges taking the bench together, and then they would work with that whole family. I'll give you an example. They basically worked themselves out of a job. So the referrals and everything before they got started were through the roof from these truancy cases. The very first family that they had Judge Williams, I remember her saying, you know, we had this kid come in, and she was really a streetwise kid. And so she said, you can't make me go to school. And Judge Williams said, well, yes, I'll have the tribal chief of police come and pick you up, and she'll sit with you in school and make sure you go. And then the kid thought a minute, and she was like, well, I'll just move out of state. And then this Judge Kingsbury that was there, she said, oh, no. She said, I'll order that you can't leave the state. And so by the 2 systems working together, that family wasn't able to play both systems off of each other anymore. And then it was an incredible transformation that family went through. The following year, there was also a transformation in the system because they didn't have a single referral for truancy. Because what was happening was that they were working together on this program, and then all of the agencies and other people started to work together, and those collaborations grew as well. And so they started to do other things, including child protection diversion and some really creative work there. And then the Knights-E Indian tribe and Kenai, Alaska was the second pilot site that we worked with. And they basically, it's the same type of a model that we did it with Leech Lake and Cass and Itasca counties, 2 judges taking the bench together, and tribal members and non-Indians. And then the Yurok tribe and Hoopa. And so there's just, it's amazing to see how things have expanded over time. And I want to share this with you. This, now, even this is dated. I can't believe we've been doing this for so long, but this is from our 10th anniversary of the Leech Lake Cass County Wellness Court. So I want to share this with you.
The Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe and the Cass County Wellness Court celebrated a milestone today. Josh Peterson has more from the ceremony.
Formed in 2006, the Leech Lake Cass County Wellness Court was the first joint jurisdiction wellness court in the nation. The Wellness Court is a post-conviction, post-sentencing DWI court founded on the 10 principles of drug courts. The court handles the cases of both tribal members and non-Indians, and today celebrated not only 10 years of the court, but also a brand new building.
This is pretty overwhelming, and I'm really glad to be a part of it and to see it go so well the way that it did today.
With natural light filling the room, a drumming group played special music to congratulate those who graduated from the program. It's success stories like these graduates who leave these judges with a good feeling of knowing that 10 years ago, this revolutionary program has played a major role in changing so many lives.
So I think that the reach of healing and turning around and becoming sober and becoming well is really fairly significant.
To see the program come so far, other communities across the United States have taken notice of the Wellness Court's success and now are implementing similar programs in their court systems.
Together, everyone achieves more. And so we've helped other courts set up in California with the Shingle Springs Man and Miwok and El Dorado County Superior Court.
Looking to the future, there remains only high hopes for the program and to see a broader joint effort between tribes and the state.
I think it shows the willingness of people to cooperate and make things work for people, because we all have common goals.
In Cass Lake, Josh Peterson, Lakeland News.
The ceremony also included a pipe presentation as well as a blessing of the pipe and a feast.
If you've enjoyed this segment of Lakeland News, please.
If I can get this to the next one.
Please consider.
All right. Here's where my technology goes south here. Just 1 second.
Making a tax-deductible contribution to Lake.
All right. So that's kind of a 10,000-foot view. Whoops. So sorry. That's the 10,000-foot view for our Healing to Wellness courts and the joint jurisdictional programming. I know that I've gone through things pretty quickly, and I just wanted to give some examples of things that you can do. And I think that the point here is that really it's anything that is going to work for you locally, whatever those needs are. If they're, and again, to look at those common goals when you're coming together, to figure out where you can work together. And so I think that that's a great place to start. And so that's basically the first part of things. And so I don't know, Johanna, if there's questions at this point that we want to field at all. I know that's kind of a quick view of everything.
I didn't see any questions coming through right now, but if people want to put them in the chat, then we'll definitely make sure they get addressed during the question and answer session. We're almost time for our break. We had it scheduled for 10:15, but we can go now. And then if people want to think about questions over the break, we'll take a 10-minute break. And during the break, we'll have a slideshow highlighting NAICJA, the Tulalip Tribal Wellness Court, and provide information on how to request training and technical assistance, as well as sign up for NAICJA's upcoming annual conference. So we'll come back at 10:10 if that works for everyone. And so we'll see you in 10 minutes or so. Thanks, everyone.
For more information on innovative programs and to learn about how your tribe can receive the free training services offered by NAICJA, please visit our website at www.naicja.org.
Welcome back from the break. Mary and I, along with Judge Wahwassuck, will be presenting next on the providing a roadmap for implementation of a joint jurisdiction court. This is the roadmap that can be found in the project team manual that Judge Wahwassuck had mentioned in her presentation. The first phase of planning a joint jurisdiction court is understanding and building collaboration. You may have some level of collaboration that exists between your two courts already, but there are different levels of collaboration. The first level is no collaboration or no cooperation, where there is no effort to help each other. The next is the minimum level of cooperation, where there are some efforts that provide help to the other court to operate more effectively. Then there is full cooperation, where the two courts work together so each one has maximum efficiency, but their operations are completely independent. The next level is collaboration. On this level, each court not only operates at maximum efficiency themselves, but they're also actively seeking to help the other court to operate through interactive efforts. Finally, there's co-creation. This is the highest level of collaboration. Courts work together so they can maximize results for both courts through joint efforts at all possible levels. Collaboration with a joint jurisdiction court can start as small as 2 people meeting informally over coffee. It'll be a good practice to agree on next steps during the whole process of building relationships. The tools listed on this slide can help to assess where your collaboration is at along the way. Part of the first step of building collaboration is finding where there is common ground. While you do not have to have all the same goals, it is important to identify similar and overlapping goals. This will help to build trust. As you start to build the collaboration, identify and gather stakeholders. Think about who you would include in planning a joint jurisdiction court. Besides considering the broadest range of stakeholders, I would recommend including those that have reservations about the initiative. I've always found that this can help to address any concerns early on and throughout the process of implementation. Consider tribal and non-tribal stakeholders and decision makers across the board as part of your stakeholder team. Many tribal courts have adopted Anglo-American judicial systems, procedures, and laws. However, tribes use traditional and non-Anglo procedures and traditional laws and are encouraged to do so. It is important to be respectful, acknowledge, use, and integrate tribal traditions throughout the entire process of building a joint jurisdiction court. And Judge Wahwassuck had mentioned how, the culture is an important part. And I think when she was sharing the YouTube video, they talked about when they had celebrated their 10 years, how they used culture as part of that. And as the judge mentioned also, it isn't just about tribal members. We exist within a community that does also include non-tribal members. The collaboration.
I just jump in. I just wanted to make just a comment on gathering stakeholders. And I think I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I think that it's important to just pick up the phone sometimes, because what you may find is that people, you may just assume that they know or that someone's talked to them, or that they understand and what you're trying to do. So I would just really encourage, just pick up the phone and get to know people. And then that way, that goes a long way to building that trust. So just to make sure that you have everybody at the table.
Yeah, and building collaboration can be hard. So I think, building those relationships is really one of the things that can help the collaboration to grow really successfully. And I think, when we do utilize email, sometimes also things can be misconstrued. And when you're having that either face-to-face or phone conversation, the message can get across that you're trying to get across without someone trying to read into the tone you have in an email, maybe that's in their mind. The next step that's outlined in the project team manual is establishing ground rules for communication. The collaboration can flourish by establishing ground rules early on in the process. The slide lists the 4 agreements example, as well as additional guidance for discussions. It's important that the group feels accountability and trust throughout the process of implementation. So having ground rules will help both accountability and trust to grow. Setting a tone for a judgment-free environment where people are encouraged to think outside of the box and freely express their ideas is critical to establishing a new initiative. Judge, did you find that this was one of the key components in helping to lay the groundwork for establishing the joint jurisdictional court?
Absolutely. And I think that when you sit down, again, because relationships, different places can be at different levels, and there can be historically a lot of mistrust and misunderstanding, to just sit down and one of the things that we did was to have people talk about why are they here? What are their goals? What do they want to see? And I think staying focused on that is really important, but there's going to be things that come up that you just, that you kind of have to agree to disagree on, or, to get past that. I mean, and to focus on things that you can do together, but that respect and really listening and everyone having a chance to say what they have to say. Sometimes it's hard to hear for some of us, but I think that it's really important in terms of building that trust to be able to feel like people are safe to communicate, and that they feel like they can open up, that everyone, whether you're a judge or a probation agent or a social worker, if you're at that table planning, you all have an equal voice. So I think it's really important to get people to speak up, because those people are the ones that are doing the on the ground work, and their input's really crucial.
I like that you say that everyone there has an equal voice, and that's, not here on the ground rules, but I think it is important to point out. And then also one of the things you guys mentioned in the manual is, not having a blanket agreement that there be confidentiality when you're having these meetings, but that people could have the ability to request having confidentiality.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that we established for, if there's things that they don't want to go beyond there, or, and really that's the beauty of this, is every group that comes together planning, it's going to be a little bit different. And again, we all bring our personal experiences in. And so we can't forget that, because when we're talking about systems change, we are the system. And so I think that human factor, you have to really keep that in mind, and sort of like, what would you need to feel comfortable, and so I think that's something that will help with that.
Yeah, and so the next step, thinking about those goals is, defining that mission and vision that you have. I know this can be an easy step to either miss or to rush through, but that vision and mission will help guide the team. So it can be a touch point back when you feel maybe if the team is getting a little lost. I know collaborative initiatives can be very overwhelming, and then it also can be easy to get lost in doing the day-to-day work of the collaboration or the day-to-day work of your own job. And so if we have those vision and mission really defined, it will help us to guide us throughout the whole process. As the slide outlines, the vision communicates where the collaboration wants to be in the future, and the mission describes how to get to where you want to be. These provide a common sense of purpose and identity, provide that long-term direction, and communicate both internally and externally what the collaborative is about. While developing the vision and mission, take time to discuss what problems you'd like the initiative to address. That can help you guide what your mission and vision look like. It can also help you when we get to the step of looking at what data and goals we need to be looking at for the initiative. So when I was working previously to NAICJA, I worked at the Pasquayaki tribe, and we had an initiative called the Child and Family Providers Networking Board. And it consisted of all the directors across the entire tribe that served children and families. And so it was a wide range of programs across different areas. And when it was established, one of the things that the board had looked at was back to a letter that one of the first chairmen of the tribe had created to directors about how to serve children and families. And we really used that to guide how we define the vision and mission of the board. And then whenever we were developing the goals, we went and looked back to the vision and mission that the Child and Family Networking Board had developed. And I think that was one of the things that helped to continue to keep us on the right path to achieving what it was that we wanted to really look at achieving.
And I would just add, I think that when planning, it's really important that this vision and mission is developed by your planning team, because I think that it's easy to come in and say, oh, okay, well, we put together this vision and mission. Does everybody approve that? And so I think it's important that you build that together, because then people that are at the table have more buy-in and when that has been created. And so, I think that's really key. And even if you use just a whiteboard with words that, sort of when people for the goals or things that they want to achieve or what they see. But it is important. Again, it's that voice at the table, and it's empowering for people to know that they might be, in a role that they don't typically get asked what they think or how things should be. And I guarantee that if you have everyone that creates this in the beginning, then it's there will be buy-in. It's something they created.
Mm-hmm. So the next step 5, is the process of mapping out the current systems. So mapping each system will help stakeholders to understand what the existing systems are. And stakeholders often have an excellent understanding of their own organizations, yet are often lacking critical information of other organizations that may impact the system as a whole. Using a hypothetical case can help flesh out the details. There are some guidelines on the slide of what to look at when mapping out the system. By understanding the nuances of how the system operates, stakeholders can better identify needs, establish goals, collaborate regarding system change. I know when I was helping to develop a truancy diversion program, one of the things that we did very early on was mapping out how the system worked. And it really could help us to identify what were the challenges, where might we have issues with families or with the system that we could address by the system development.
I would also add, it's amazing how, and having worked in both the tribal system and the state system as a judge both places, how we just sort of assume that everyone knows what we do. Even the people that are involved in our own proceedings, or, as judges, we go through the things that we usually say, not thinking about whether someone necessarily understands that. We use lots of acronyms in our different service areas. And really, a lot of times, it really, when you do this, you not only can find ways sort of where the systems intersect that you might be able to work together, but you can also find some of those weaknesses where you have areas of improvement. And so this is a great way to familiarize everyone with both systems and to look for new ways that you can work together.
So when you guys were mapping out systems, did you map them out individually, or did you do it all as a group and map out each system?
We did it as a group, and so we did it a couple different ways, but that seemed to be what worked best, is that everyone sort of got that information at the same time. So for instance, the state judge would talk about, and the district attorney would talk about how a system flows through from charging, from arrest to all through charging through the course of the case. And then the tribal, for the tribal system, it was the same thing, to sort of see how cases go through and what they're working on now. So it helped to have everyone get that information at the same time.
Thank you. The next step is the goals. So that's going to be developed by your planning team. So using the mission and vision, goals should be developed that are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Collaborative goals tell stakeholders where the collaboration is going and how it plans to get there. Goals promote planning to determine how the goals will be achieved. If you look back at your mission and vision, it can help define your goals. During this step, also consider what existing data you have, as well as data that you'd like to collect. Ask yourself if there is data that can help establish baselines. And then think about outcomes and not just outputs, not how many number of clients are we seeing, but what ones are having good outcomes. Consider goals not just for the system, but for the individuals that you intend to serve. So instead of just saying, we want our system to run more efficiently, we want to think about how that individual is being served. Like Judge Wahwassuck was mentioning, that one individual who had gotten a driver's license or employment or school. And those things have a big impact on an entire family when those kind of outcomes are achieved.
And I think this also sort of what you expect or what you want to see then changes for your participants is really a good way to kind of tie into these goals and to decide what you want to do, because we would sort of say, okay, what is the person that's coming into your court? What's their life like? What are their characteristics? What are their risk need factors, things like that. And then when they complete your program as you're going forward, what would you like ultimately for those changes? What do you want to see happen? Because that can really inform along the way what you do in your program and what your goals are.
Getting training, I think, is part of the process throughout, right? And especially training that you can get together as a team. That's another part of implementing that joint jurisdiction court, as well as building the collaboration, building your knowledge base. So training on drug and alcohol courts, tribal healing to wellness courts, and other evidence-based practices are all options that you should consider when developing a joint jurisdiction court. At the end of the training, we'll provide you with a list of resources to be able to tap into some of the training options. Judge Wahwassuck, what kind of training did you have as a team that was helpful when you guys were developing the joint jurisdiction court?
In the very beginning with the Cass County Leech Lake program, Cass County signed up for NAICJ's, their DWI court training, and went through that regular programming, that training program that they have. And I think that's where the state court Judge Smith really realized that he needed the tribe, if this was ever going to be successful, to be working together. And so, there's so many those basic trainings. And the other thing too is we discovered is that not everyone knows. I think from what it sounds like, this audience has a pretty good handle on healing to wellness court or drug and DWI courts, that type of thing, on specialty courts. Not everybody has that basic knowledge. And so especially when you have new team members that come in, it's important that there's training opportunities. If you have turnover like that people understand what it is that they're doing and why. And so I think that it also, besides just the information that you get at trainings, it's such a great way to get to know each other and build that cohesiveness of your team. And so that provides opportunities, for that, again, on a sort of a personal level, to build trust and confidence and knowledge in each other. Besides just the nuts and bolts of it, but there's lots of trainings that, even just general trainings on building collaborations, anything like that you can get, I think is all very good. And I think when you talk about evidence-based training programs, I think it's really important with all of this to keep in mind the effects of trauma. I mean, that's like a whole nother presentation for another day, but the people that are going to be, including us, that are involved in these things, we may have our own histories of trauma in certain cases. That sometimes that's why we get into helping professions. But I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, what we know about brain science, all this evidence-based things that we as judges and service providers that we learn about, but then you sort of shelve that when you're doing something else. And so I think it's really important to blend those things that from other trainings, because that will be, child development, comes into play, especially if you're working in a family type situation when we're trying to work with the whole family. So keep those things in mind. All those trainings could be helpful.
Mhm. Historical trauma and intergenerational trauma are definitely, come into play when we talk about working with tribal members.
Yes.
And, speaking about, looking at the culture, one of the things is infusing culture throughout the planning, development, and implementation of a joint jurisdiction court. Culture is inherent in the entire process of joint jurisdiction work. Both creating the court and defining its procedures. Joint jurisdiction courts can be key in helping people to reconnect with their culture, with their community, and helping people to learn about their values, traditions, and how to restore relationships. It can be a healing and learning experience for everyone involved, participants and court team members.
And I think this is another thing when it gets to best practices and sort of what we know works. I mean, I think that as time goes on, there's more and more studies that show that, being involved in your culture and your traditions it builds resiliency, it's healing. And so I think that, and also some of the core values, we talked about with Leech Lake, the Anishinaabe values, and Kenaitze has their values wheel. And so those are things, like I said, like respect and, and honor. I mean, all these things that are good. It doesn't matter who you are, that to learn that way. And so, and it really with some courts they actually use the name, their language in the name and their phases. They may have things that people participate in. For instance, we had in lieu of doing a support group meeting, someone could go to a sweat lodge. Those types of things to really put that in everything that you do and that approach. And I think that a big part of integrating that too is it gets back to that listening and, being, keeping an open mind and letting people have a voice to put those things together.
The next step is establishing the participant population. And this is actually 2 steps. So the first is determining who the target population is, or the population that will be eligible to participate. You can again look back at your vision and mission and goals to determine the population that the court will serve. Juvenile, adult, child welfare, adults, as well as determining then who is eligible. It's important to decide who will be disqualified. Will you have automatic disqualifiers? Will you make the decisions on a case-by-case basis instead of automatic disqualifiers? If so, who will make the determinations? So those are important things to consider as you're starting to establish a joint jurisdiction court.
And I think that this is really a key. I know that when we started off, we had a lot of folks that were potential participants that really could have benefited from the program. But due to our funding streams, if someone had a domestic violence conviction, they couldn't come in. And so those were, some of those disqualifiers may be dictated by funding sources, depending on what you have. And the other thing is that it can kind of, when you think about that, for instance, when we talk about if it's juvenile or adult or who you're going to serve, some of these can be sort of the door into the program. So for instance, with Shingle Springs, they focused on kids that were on truancy referrals, but then they were able to work with the whole family. And so I think that it's kind of when you think about, are you just going to work with that one person? Or are you then going to provide services for their family? And I really think that doing something where they can come in, where you're at least providing something that support for the family, it can really achieve those goals, especially because you're achieving family wellness through this. So it's important to think about that.
And then I'll turn it over to Mary. She'll go over the next 10 kind of steps or phases.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Mary Rodriguez. I'm a program attorney at NAICJA, and I'm so glad everybody could join. Thank you, Joanna, for taking over the slides. So the next slide is talking about identifying phases of the court. So this would be how many stages or phases your client is going to need to complete the program. In the video we just watched, if you were able to watch it during the break of the Tulalip Tribal Court, at least at that point, when the recording was made, they had 5 phases for their court. I know other tribes that I've worked in, because I have a public defender background, have had 3 phases or even 4 phases. So it really just depends on what works best for the tribe that you're working in, the program that you're working on. You want to determine how long each phase is going to be, with flexibility built in, because if you say you're in phase 1 for 3 months and somebody has a positive UA, they may have to go back and complete different parts of their program, or you might have graduation steps that say if you complete phase 1, to complete phase 1, you need to have a certain level of sobriety. So you do want to be flexible with the phases and naming each phase that can be culturally specific. I worked for a tribe that did a wellness court where their phases were all named after, related to the canoe journey, because that was something that was very important to their tribe.
And I think really one of the things that we always tried to get going, and I think that we're not that successful with, and I'm not really sure why, but an alumni phase, because I think people that have been through the program can be an incredible resource for people that are in the program. And some programs have even they have an orientation phase and kind of let people sort of get their feet wet in the program and get used to things. And so that really it can be, and they're tied to our manuals. And so the participants, again, they know, for instance, Mary mentioned if somebody had a positive UA that they may, be set back a phase, or there may be something like that happens. And so that all in terms of your policy and procedure manual and that sort of thing, and people know going into that. But it is flexible and depends on what's going to work for you.
And Judge Wahwassuck, was there a difference in phases for, say, like a juvenile court versus maybe adult court? Did you find like there needed to be some different flexibility for those two?
Well, with our programming that we had for a reentry, they were a little bit different depending, and it wasn't so much of I won't use the word rigid as, but I think that it wasn't quite as much structure as the healing to wellness courts for our DWI and the drug courts, because we were following those key components. With the other courts, there was more flexibility, and it was kind of the orientation phase and coming in. And we actually did have alumni for our juvenile programming that would come back and provide some of that support. So there was flexibility there. They were a little bit different.
Thank you. The next slide is determining components. So you want to know how your referrals to the program are going to be made. Where are those going to come from? If you have joint jurisdiction, is there a specific person at the tribe who's going to make those referrals? Is there a specific person from the state program who may be making those referrals? A lot of places will have a court coordinator who would sort of screen a lot of these referrals before they came to the core team, who may make decisions based on, the individual application or the individual and the type of treatment they need. So you do want to figure that out, because it can get very convoluted if you're having referrals from 8 different agencies and you don't have a court coordinator to make sure those are all being screened. I know that personally, I've seen a court coordinator who originally it was just court referrals, and the community reached out and said, I have somebody that I really want to be in this program. So the plan, again, is always flexible and was adjusted so that there could be community members who were referred in a different way, and not just through the court, which is, one of the great things about these programs and this guidebook is that it does say, things may change as you go forward.
And they will. And I think that's sorry, I was going to say, and that's the beauty of this, though. It is because it's you know, you will change over time with things, and you're going to find out things that may work and that don't work so well. And that they talk about all these things, your policies and procedures, and they're living documents. There's something you need to revisit. And if things aren't working or they could work better, don't be afraid to change them.
Yes. And, you know, the incentives and sanctions, that's something that you will need to make sure are predictable. The words on here are predictable, fair, consistent, and administered with evidence-based principles. Your participants are going to need consistency, and they're going to need to feel like they are being treated fairly. It can really, if you don't have those sanctions consistent, it can really cause a lot of turmoil in your wellness court, and having two courts come together makes it even more difficult. So you do all want to be on the same page as that. There was times where I helped develop a wellness court, and we would sort of do a case-by-case situation with a client, or want to, and then realized that we couldn't do that because it was just making it unfair for everybody else in the program. So those are really great words for how your incentives and how your sanctions should play out. Judge Wahwassuck, did you find it hard? I don't know if when you first started wanting to kind of be flexible with those and realizing it maybe wasn't the best decision.
We did, and this is an example of how things change over time. We were really, when we first started, we had this little sanction grid, like for, you know, so many strikes and you're out, or that kind of thing. And everyone laughed at us. And it was like, you know, and that didn't work. I mean, that wasn't, and then it turns out, you know, they're going, you know, more, that's how things change over time. I mean, that helps things to be, you know what's going to happen, but there does have to be, you have to keep in mind that what's a sanction and incentive to someone it's different for everyone. And so, you know, that you may not need, what you're trying to do with this is to get results. You're trying to change behavior. So you need to keep that in mind with any incentives and sanctions, and that incentives can be just clapping for people. We always clap for people when they announce at the end their days of recovery. And so that's an incredible incentive for people. And, you know, in terms of sanctions, and you need to know that things are going to happen. I mean, the story I always tell is that, you know, we used to, for birthdays and things, we'd have cupcakes, you know, when it was a participant's birthday. And so we had a participant come in, and she had a relapse and had some other violations. And so she was going to get a jail sanction. And I mean, she knew that it was, you know, something that was going in, and we had her cupcakes, and I mean, because it was kind of an incentive for her birthday, and we did that, and she had her cupcake, and then, you know, and she was very accepting of the fact that it was her choices that had led to that sanction. So she took her cupcake and off she went. But you know, it was something that you can be flexible and get the desired results.
Very true. And on top of it, with incentives, you're talking about, they don't need to have a monetary value. There's a very small budget for a lot of healing to wellness courts, joint jurisdiction courts. You know, finding the money is going to be another slide. However, you know, the praise is one. There was a tribe that had a reader board that you would see when you went onto the reservation, and putting up the person's name, like, great job this week, you know, not having to say like you graduated a phase, just shout out to whoever's name it was. So there are some really easy things you can do to give pride to your participants that don't necessarily involve things that cost an amount. Graduation commencement requirements. So graduation should be a big deal. There are very few graduations in your life, if you think about it. And some of your participants didn't even go through some of those important graduations. So this is a time for them to feel important, for them to feel that memorable occasion, to invite their family, so their family has pride in them. That's a big part of addiction, is the shame, getting over the shame, working past the shame, coming to terms with your shame, and having a formal graduation ceremony where these participants, graduates, can be really proud of themselves is a great idea. You know, you also get to have your culture or your tribe's cultural practices at that ceremony. This makes it much more personable. If you're a non-native in the joint jurisdiction side of the state, seeing this community come together and seeing this spirituality, the cultural practices, it is really powerful in ways that, you know, are going to reflect back on those people who might be non-native, who maybe have never witnessed some of the ceremonial aspects of the tribe. So not only does it increase pride, but you can also, it's an opportunity for you to reach other people who may not have experienced something so enlightening.
I have to give an example of, and it's so important to invite family members and community members to see that and to be a part of it, because for one thing, it's not just the participant, their family has probably done a lot of work too, you know, to get to that point. There's a lot that's involved. But I'll never forget, we had a graduate of our Itasca Leech Lake Wellness Court, and he brought this guy from an AA meeting that he had attended. And this is somebody, this graduate was from the community of Ball Club, one of the communities on the Leech Lake Reservation. And his friend was a non-Indian guy. And so his friend got up to speak and say a few words at the graduation. And he said, you know, he said, when I was growing up, my dad always told me that nothing good ever came out of Ball Club, that there was, you know, nothing but a bunch of drunks and drug, you know, users and things like that. Nothing good ever came out of there. And he said, and when I first saw you in a meeting, he said, I immediately didn't like you because you were from Ball Club. He said, but as I got to know you through these meetings and even coming to court with you sometimes, he said, you know, I realized who you are. And he said, and now my kids will grow up and they will never know. I mean, they will always know that that's not true, that good things do come out of Ball Club. And so, I mean, it changes, you know, the very fabric of relationships in your community. So you got to think about how that involving people can really spread that message.
That's a great example. You'll need to decide and determine the component about fees, whether you would be charging fees for your participants and what those fees would go towards. Money can definitely be an issue for participants. However, there is a cost associated with these programs, especially intense programs where you have a core team of people who are working with individuals. I know state court may have more fees associated with their programs than tribal courts. So coming together and determine what is fair, what is equitable, what is possible is going to be really important to nail down. I believe I had I worked for a tribe that did a wellness court, and they had the opportunity to convert their weekly fee or monthly fee to community service. So there was a way for somebody who didn't have a job or who was, you know, really involved in their wellness court and didn't have the time for a job yet, they could work a community service 10 hours to make up for the $10 or $20 or whatever it was. So that worked well, and that also kind of made it equitable for people who might not be in the same position financially. The other thing was Judge Wahwassuck said, you know, you have to make it payable by smaller installments. So maybe it's $5 a week and it costs $400. That's, I believe, what Leech Lake did. But every week is $5 because $5 is something that people can actually afford or can figure out how to, you know, save that $5 for wellness court and make that a priority.
And we even actually worked that in as one of our incentives, that when people reach certain milestones, that one of the incentives that they could choose, because we gave them some choices there, they could get $5 off their wellness court fees. So that's something that was an incentive there, you know, that we were able to mend those or meld those together.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And your fees, you can determine what you're going to use those for. It may be, you know, administrative costs. It may be something you can share with your participants to say, when you graduate, we have this, you know, formal ceremony, there's graduation gifts. This goes to your future graduation as sort of a, you know, carrot to get there at the end, because you've really invested your time and your cost into the program. Next slide is identifying a court coordinator. I'm sure Judge Wahwassuck can tell you how important it is to have a court coordinator who is efficient, skilled at what they do, able to manage competing priorities, individuals, emergencies, fires to put out at all times, and good at interacting with the community. You're dealing with the, county community, you're dealing with lawmakers, you're dealing with judges, you're dealing with clients, you're dealing with the tribal community. So this is somebody who has to engage on a lot of levels. And I'm sure Judge Wahwassuck, it's an important search as far as establishing this joint jurisdiction court.
It's so key. And I know that there's been discussions different places. Maybe they'll have their, whoever's providing supervision, their caseworker manager also be the coordinator. And I mean, you want a standalone coordinator. And again, it's not somebody that just puts a report together and prepares for court. This is your ambassador. It can be out in the community too. So you need someone that is not afraid to get out there. And even someone that can go and ask if there's community businesses that want to donate gift cards or something for incentives. So you need someone that's good with the paperwork and good with people.
Yes. And, there is the potential for there to be some conflict where not all parties see eye to eye. When you're working with this many people or having a core team with this many service providers, and some being from maybe the tribe and others being from the state. And your court coordinator may need to manage those, may need to be able to be good at skills such as mediation and sort of, smoothing over any sort of disagreement, because everybody has the same goal, but sometimes we don't, all see eye to eye on how we should get there. So it is definitely important to identify a court coordinator. On top of it, if it's a joint jurisdiction court coordinator, there are very few people who have that experience. So you're looking at somebody who's going to have to learn something new, even if they've, coordinated at a court before. It probably wasn't one that was between two separate places. So to keep in mind, you're going to have somebody who needs a learning curve. There will be a learning curve. Next slide. You will have to develop steering committees, core team, and subcommittees. These are very important. And it may be something that evolves as your program starts. It may be something where you start with a steering committee just to get the ball rolling for the policy, the planning. Then you figure out your core team. And as you get rolling, you're able to add more of the subcommittees. I know for me, the data subcommittee is something that, collecting data is so important for us to continue getting funding, to continue, having trainings where people want to learn about joint jurisdiction courts. It's helpful to have that data to show this is worth investing in, this works. But that's one that's a difficult one, I know, in my personal practice, to have that figured out. So to have that on the radar at the beginning is a great idea, even if it's something that evolves with more and more staff, or maybe you just have one program that's, collecting 5 different statistics about people. At least it's a beginning, and then that can evolve as your program goes along. Judge Wahwassuck, what's your experience with the subcommittees and developing those? Was it all in at the beginning, or did they kind of flow through?
Well, it was pretty all in. I mean, we had our core team and everybody, we have the same folks that are there on a consistent basis, and then steering committees. And really the steering committee can tie into your public relations work too, because when you have decision makers, like for instance, on steering committees, we might have a board of commissioner member and a tribal council member. And so you have at least people that are there and they are familiar with what's going on. And then I think that way they can take that information back to who they work with, and then it keeps them up to date. And then they can also be cheerleaders for the program, because they can say, yes, I'm a part of the steering committee, and I know the work that's being done. And it is important to revisit your policies and procedures. Again, they're living documents, and things are going to change. And you may decide that something you want to do, you may see something that another program is doing that you want to integrate. And so then you can change that, so you're not married to that. And just one thing on data, I would say, and really, Mary, your point about collecting it early on is so key, because you don't want to get 6 months or a year down the line and you haven't started to collect this data. You can add to it at some point, but it's really important to keep that And we were able to use the state system. They helped to, with probation, help to keep, keep all that data together as far as tracking things. So it's, some places have databases that are built, others, need to start from scratch, but it's just important to start tracking it right away.
Mm-hmm. The next slide is rallying resources for sustainability. This is sort of the, there's some funding aspects for this, but this is also taking advantage of the resources that are out there in the community, utilizing the volunteers, the community resource, and looking to, grants, government, foundations, who can help us keep this going. Going, like we said, with the coordinator, they may be court coordinator, maybe going door to door to businesses, or messaging on social media and saying, hey, we have this amazing program, would you be able to donate gift cards? A lot of times those simple asks can, there can be really amazing partnerships that form from something like that. I do know there was, in one of the wellness courts I worked in, there was an ask for gift cards for the tribal coffee shop, which turned into potential jobs down the road for graduates, because there was a conversation that was had about, hey, we're doing this amazing program. They wanted to learn more, and now there were wellness court graduates who worked at the coffee shop. So taking advantage of those resources and really reaching out. Judge Wahwassuck, do you have anything to add?
I do, on the juvenile programming, some things were grant funded, but one of the things that we were able to do, and this was like an absolute dream, but when we had our Vomit and Anishinaabeg team together, we had a therapist, a mental health therapist on the team. We had a person that could do billing. I mean, we really had this robust team. We had a cultural coordinator. And so we were able to get that program licensed through the state of Minnesota as a treatment program. And again, that's where some of those silos come in, because you have other programs that are able to submit for reimbursement, but I mean there is a way to be able to do that, and so that helped to fund the program. And I think that basically at one time we were looking at with the reimbursement rates that we only had to be working with 5 or 6 kids with what we were doing to be able to fund the program, in terms of, because of all the services that we were providing, we were able to bill for that. And so there's ways that you can do that to really get creative and sort of supplement what you have. So that's where a lot of this, it really opens up a lot of doors for funding.
Yeah, that's amazing. Our next slide.
Mary, I just wanted to add something also.
Oh, yeah.
Now that if you're looking at child welfare cases and the change from Title 4E, once a child welfare case is open, but if we're looking at Family First now, and there are some reimbursable, allowable expenses before a child welfare case is open, there may be opportunities, like Judge Wahwassuck had said, for some reimbursement in those cases also.
Thanks, Joanna. Measuring results, we've touched on data, we've touched on how important that is. You are going to want to evaluate how the court is processing, how it's running, your participant outcomes and satisfaction with the court. Participant outcomes, they may not be a traditional, graduation rates, etc. There may be outcomes that include who was employed following this program, who remained employed. Look at your recidivism rates. I don't necessarily think that needs to be a super important factor, but there might be something there in, did this person come back through the court? Did they come back through the court less, might be more of the question. Were they there every month with a new criminal case and you saw some sort of decrease in that? The other thing is the data, collecting the data. There's a lot of different data out there. I know that it can be very overwhelming. There are partners who can help you with collecting that data. So partnering with a local university or a college or another nonprofit organization to help collect that data. There's a lot of people trying to evaluate programs that are happening in tribal courts, happening in state courts. You don't have to be the first person to come across these questions. And there's some really great resources on how to measure results that are a really good place to start. We'll definitely share those. But Judge Wahwassuck, did you have anything to comment on your personal experience with measuring results?
Well, and there have been studies, that evaluations on the programs that have been done, large evaluations to show cost savings and recidivism and things like that. But I think that a lot of times when we talk about evaluation of tribal programs, is like you hear that, oh, it's just anecdotal, or don't have that hard and fast data. And I think that, but those are the things that if there's a way to figure out a way to capture that. Some of that qualitative data, like you say, I mean, did someone come through less? For instance, if you're working with an older child that, maybe have been truant from school, or the younger kids, I mean, are they not becoming truant because there's healing in the family? I mean, I think that those are things that if there's a way to capture that, it shows that it's not just the participant that's getting the benefit of these programs, and that there's cost savings across different systems too.
That's so true. And this is a program that can be really flexible, creative. It can change constantly. Your data can also be flexible and start taking into account, maybe you weren't surveying graduates 6 months later. Maybe you start doing that and getting some feedback like, okay, I've remained sober, or I was able to get a job. My, kids were not truant from school because I was home. Being creative with what you are collecting. And, I think there's a lot, like you were saying, I think some people expect just raw numbers, but you can also get, anecdotes, you can get narratives about what people have been saying about the program. And those are also forms of data that can help get funding, that can help other tribes trying to do this type of work know what they should be expecting.
And don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, I think that you made the point of that if there's other places that are doing this, or maybe they have a database or some of the, fields or whatever that they're capturing, find out what's happening other places that you can, that can be really helpful.
So I believe that was the end of our roadmap. So I'm going to, oh wait, sorry, I was not. Drafting a policy and procedures manual. Again, that can be a living document, which may change as you evolve, as your joint jurisdiction court evolves. You want to circulate that draft for review and comment. Make sure you include all of the people on the core team for that. There may be people who you would not necessarily think have a lot to add, or that's not usually their area of work, but then you get this something inventive that you didn't even think about because you didn't ask the person who was in charge of mental health what their opinion was about the policy and procedures. So make sure you're involving everybody in that draft, in that comments. I think it's been most effective where I've sat down with the group and gone through the requested changes, and then everybody has a voice at the table about what they think needs to be in there.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, to be able to revisit that and have people really talk about how it affects their work, because as a judge, there may be things that I think should be in the policy, or I'm not thinking about it then how that may affect a treatment provider in terms of like sharing information or something like that. And so you really need to make sure that you've got everybody there for their input, to have that and know that they're living documents. The other thing too is we always said that we followed the case method, copy and steal everything. And so there's the benefit that you have is that you're not the first one. And, as we talked about earlier, there are other programs that are up and going. And, my experience is that everyone is very willing to share what they have to help other people. And so, there's, again, if you can avoid reinventing the wheel, that's always a good thing.
That is so true. So we're going to turn it back over to Judge Wahwassuck to talk about sort of the implementation. We just talked about the roadmap for implementation. Now we're talking about her personal experience with implementation of the joint jurisdictional court. We'll continue. If you still have questions, add them into the chat box and we will address those at the end.
Okay, let me see if I can do this again here. All right. So we created project team together, everyone achieves more, and we really learned a lot. And I have to tell you that from the very beginning, when we didn't know, when Judge Smith and I thought, well, we'll start this. And I'll never forget the day that he and Reno Wells, the head of probation, came to Leech Lake to ask for help. And that was a big step. Judge Smith was not a real popular guy. He put a lot of Leech Lakers in prison, and there was difficult feelings there. And I had just been appointed as a tribal court judge, and I happened to be in the tribal council offices for something, and I got called into the chairman's office because Judge Smith and the head of probation were there. And so they gave their spiel about how they wanted Leech Lake to be involved in this planning process and to work together. And, the chairman, politely listened, and then they left. And as soon as they were gone, he said, now what do they want to do to us? And I think that really learning from the very planting of the seed with this through where we are today, there've been so many lessons that we learned along the way. And did that go forward to the next slide? I just want to make sure. Okay, good. I've got it. So I love this quote about that we're the self and self-governance, and we have to organize ourselves to get the job done. We have to take our own vision of the future and make it happen. And I think really this is where you are. You need to figure out how you want things to be. How the people that are suffering from addiction and other issues that lead to criminal behavior and family dysfunction, you have to figure out how you want to address that, with the changes that you want to make, and create that vision, make it happen. And it can be different, through tribe to tribe, for your different state courts, but you make that vision. And it doesn't have to be what Leech Lake did. Doesn't have to be what they did at NAICJA or anywhere else. It's what you can use that to inform what your work, but you don't have to copy that wholesale to think, well, it won't work here, so I can't do it, because you have that ability to make these things happen. So, and just a little bit more of the nuts and bolts about how we did the planning process. I think it's important to look at it's important to have a facilitator come in. I really do, to help things move forward. And again, having, I love that the definition of an expert is someone from out of town with a briefcase. So that's who we were. And so, when we came in, but we were able to, because we were not from there. And so it wasn't like, it wasn't a state judge, or this particular person that it was like, oh yeah, there's that bossy one again. It was somebody from outside to help everyone come together as equals. And so we had 3 to 4 on-site meetings for each one of the pilot sites, and met for 2 or 3 days for each one of the pilot sites for this planning, and kind of went through those steps that we just went through for that roadmap. And again, the ground rules, and I can't tell you how important that is at the very beginning to set those ground rules and communication, because that will, one program, we thought there was one particular very, very important person that could have tanked the whole thing. He didn't want to participate. And so we couldn't figure out why, what was the deal? Why doesn't he want to do this? And so, we did the pick up the phone. I mean, I can't tell you enough, make a call. So Judge Smith called this person and was like, hey, we're doing this, and I hear you don't want to, that you're not interested or not supportive. And he said, nobody asked me. I mean, this was the DA, the district attorney, and no one had said, hey, you want to come to this party with us? And so, I mean, those are the things that you can't overlook, that and having those ground rules to make sure that there's that voice. So that's really a big thing that we learned. And then, like, you got to identify people's expectations and kind of their values and what they think they're doing, because there's also been planning work that we did where the goals that everybody had coming into it weren't the same. They didn't understand healing to wellness courts. They didn't know kind of why they were there. And so, and I think that's something that we learned as a planning team, as project team, that there was one site that we didn't do the wilder inventory on. And so that was something going into it. We didn't really know where everybody was. And I don't know exactly how that happened. I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason. So, that way we were able to see how important that was, to see where everybody is coming in. And if there's you may need to step back and do some training for people about what it is that you're trying to do. Not everyone's familiar with healing to wellness courts. Not everyone, may know the importance of that. You may have to get law enforcement to buy in. And so those are all things that will help to identify those expectations. And so those are just kind of some general things about our planning process. This is a picture at in Kenai, Alaska, with the Kenaitze tribe. And you can see, it's sort of like Mexican sausage in a way. It was kind of, everybody was at the table and we had the whiteboard, and we were able to hammer it out. And so this is kind of what the planning process looked like, and with stakeholders from, all the different groups that were part of planning. And so, like I said, 2 or 3 days at each place and different site visits to be able to get everyone together. A little bit more about the project, and I identified them earlier, but the one with Northern Cheyenne and the U.S. District Court for the District of Montana, that we just went through the planning process. They didn't get operational, and but I think it's important to know that it's not just for places where there's Public Law 280. It's not just state and tribal. It can be any court. It can be with the federal system. Again, it's your goals and what are you trying to achieve. And I think that the U.S. District Court, working together, there's other ways and other types of collaborations that this fits the model. So it's not just tribal state. So I think that's really important to think about. And then, with the other programs that we're able to look at these pilot sites to develop their own programs. We went through that list earlier of the programs that have come about. And this is just a copy of the manual that they were referring to and did the slides from. So I really encourage everybody. There's a link in the manual here or in the presentation. I probably won't, I don't know if you'll be able to click on that, but you can get it if you just Google the Joint Jurisdiction Courts Manual. There's a lot of good information in there. I really encourage everybody to take a look at it. So now kind of my insider information or my tips, because we really learned a lot through this whole process. And a lot of this is kind of copying or repeating some of the things that we said, but I want to emphasize some of these points that we talked about. That culture, people sometimes are afraid of it, and even tribal members. One of the things that we found was that not everybody knows their ways. And I think that, that can be part of that disconnect that causes people discomfort in their lives, is they don't have that foundation. But I think it's important that even through these programs to realize that you can be connecting your own people with who they are. And that's something that they're learning through that they were able to develop a whole other way to do things. And I think the other thing that we had to keep in mind too, is that on the Leech Lake Reservation, there's a lot of different communities, a lot of different belief systems. And so there are people that don't go to traditional ceremonies. They go to the Catholic Church or something like that. And so when you're infusing some of that, you have to take that into account. And some people may not want to participate, even tribal members we found, in the cultural aspects of things. And the example someone gave to me one time was sort of like, someone may not want to go and participate in a sweat lodge ceremony, but maybe it's good to know, like, how do you put it together, or something, kind of what goes into it. And so you can kind of take things to a certain point and have everyone feel comfortable with that. So I think that the way that you integrate culture is going to be a little bit different depending on where you are. But the important thing to keep in mind is that the foundation of whether it's the Anishinaabe grandfathers, the 7 values, or the Kenaitze, their values wheel, there's healing in that. If we're trying to follow that way, whoever you are, there can be healing in that. And so it's really, really important. And it's kind of hard to do sometimes, because it sometimes in your policy and procedure manual, it may not always come through, but it's kind of in how you run things to integrate that. And that trust and respect are so key. And I can't emphasize that enough, that this is person to person, and you're trying to heal lives, but you're also trying to get to be able to work together in spite of a long history of animosity, tribal state animosity, community animosity, individual animosity. And so it's really important that you build that in your team from the very beginning and have respect for each other, because it will open doors. And we found that when we all came to the table, that sometimes those feelings were so raw and there was so much hurt that it's hard to get past that. But sometimes if you give someone a voice, and sometimes you need to just take the time to let someone say what they have to say. You know, someone told me one time that if you ask the question, you have to be willing to listen to the answer. And sometimes when we get in our time world and everything, and oh my God, I've got an appointment I got to go to and all that, you shut off your listening, and you don't want to listen to what's being said. And maybe it comes in the form of a story, or somebody giving an example of someone else's life, or an analogy. But we have to be able to listen to that and to take the time. And I guarantee you that investment in giving people an equal voice and being able to share what they're feeling it will pay dividends, 1,000-fold down the line, because that person, they may come into it feeling really uncomfortable and, kind of all that historical things that they carry around, but then they realize, what, we're trying to do something better together. And then you can get past that. And, we talked earlier about the kind of the stages of collaboration and different from, just a cooperation up through total 2 judges taking the bench, joint jurisdictional courts. But it's more than just saying, yeah, we're going to work together. And what you're really doing is creating a new thing. And that's what's so great about it, is that it can be whatever you need at where you are, that thing. It can be whatever your targets are, whatever types of cases you feel that you can work together on, but really to come together to realize that you're creating something new. And it's all local needs, depending on what that structure is. I saw some things in the chat about being able to link up and use Zoom, and because we have, as you saw in Minnesota, we have huge distances to cover. It's the same there. I mean, you have lots of tribes, lots of distance, but you can use technology to bring people together, and it works. And as long as it's important to get together in person sometimes, because that's how you build those personal relationships. But whatever your local needs are really going to determine that structure. And again, it's 2 people. I mean, it's just that it's sort of people say, well, how do I get started? Well, maybe pick up the phone and say, I want to work together here. For the state judges that are out here, if you had an issue, and we'll talk about the court rule here shortly, but if you had an issue with a tribal court, and to be able to do that communication that's provided for in the rules, do you know who you would call? Do you know who the tribal judges are? To be able to just pick up the phone and say, hey, this is Korey and I've got an issue. And just to be able to do that. It's really important to be able to do that and realize that everything that you're doing, it's relationship based. Because again, we are the system. And we've talked a lot about those grand rules for communication, but that's not just in your planning team, that's also communication in court. And one of the things that it can be, it takes a little bit of practice, especially when you have 2 judges taking the bench together. It's really important that one judge or the other doesn't sort of take the lead all the time. And then, because it's tempting some places I've seen where the state judge maybe takes the lead and the tribal judge sort of is, ask questions as an afterthought or something in that communication. What we would do is alternate. The participants, when we would call them up, I'd call a participant, then Judge Smith would call one, and then that way we'd each start and really be able to get in there and have a good conversation with people. And then in everything that you do, you want to make sure that you're equals. I mean, you're equals at that planning table. People need to know that the judges, when they take the bench together in a true joint jurisdictional court, the systems are coming together as equal partners. So that's really important to communicate that in all that you do. And again, the mapping, this does sort of copy some of the things that we talked about in the last slides, but really it's important to emphasize some of these things that as state judges, a lot of times we just do things so many times and we don't even really think about, or at least, judges that I know about sort of the words that we use and are people understanding what we're saying. We were in one of our planning meetings and we were doing some role play, and the state judge was kind of taking through this, what would happen in state court in a case, and was going through, and the person that was the subject or the defendant said, I don't have any clue what you just said. And so how many of those people that appear in front of us as state court judges, do they get what we're saying? And I think that, and that's where this comes in with people's trauma history, and the fact that we know that brain science tells us that if you've had, that complex childhood trauma, especially, that it's going to rewire your brain, and that is going to affect you throughout your life into adulthood. And so that's another thing that people need to understand, and in that communication and having that open environment. The other thing too is that you want your participants to feel like they can be open and talking and sharing. We talk a lot here about planning and the team and what you're doing with your court, but your participants need to have that same sense of openness, to know that you have built something with both systems that you're trying to help and improve their lives. And even if they're in trouble for something, a lot of times they will come in and be open about it because they know that they're getting help, and that's what it's about. And so it's important to know what the current system is, because if you don't know what you're doing now, then you don't know what you need to change. And look for, I don't think of obstacles, I think of them as opportunities. And so, if there's something that looks like a roadblock, then maybe that's a great place that you need to focus on, that you might be able to work together to improve that and flip that obstacle into an opportunity for change. And to get your success stories. And I think this is partly about your planning teams, your public relations. Shout it from the rooftops, because you want people to know you are celebrating the people that are in your court. You're celebrating your accomplishments for what you've done. This is a big deal that you've done by bringing together when you create something like this. And so you will, by sharing those success stories, we talk about sort of the referral and how people come in. We would get calls all the time that say, I want into your court, my kid needs in, or and so it's kind of like figure out how they can get in. And as you get those success stories out, you'll have more referrals, there'll be more trust in the system. So it's important to communicate that. And it's also important in terms of your local government or tribal government to share that and make sure that they're aware of things, because it's like everywhere. Someone may not like the outcome, and they may run to their board of commissioner, or their county commissioner, or the tribal council member and say, what they did. And so then, but if you have shared that information and they know what's happening, then they're in a lot better position to leave you alone. Let's just put it that way, because they understand, they know that things are working. And then if you've done something like that of sanction, or if someone has to be terminated, they know there's a process, and they realize that. And you have to be flexible. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough, that you have all of these documents, because that's going to be your guide. But you need to be able to change that. They say that things do change, and you may decide, like we did with our original wellness court. We saw a lot of participants come in that were in child protection cases, so we created that other program for them for the family healing to wellness court. So we were able to be flexible and add that on. And don't be afraid to try new things. I mean, it's like I told you about our sanctions grid. We thought that was such a great idea at the very beginning, and it was just it kind of hampered what we wanted to do at the time, and so we changed it. And so it's okay to change things and make things a little bit different as far as what's working, what's not working. Another thing that's really, really key is to plan for transitions of leadership and staff, because you don't want this to be Korey's program. It's not Judge Wahwassuck is doing this, and then Judge Wahwassuck's gone, and then you get a new tribal council in, or a change in a board, or new state court judges, and then it's kind of their program, and so that person's gone. But what you need to do is make sure that you are planning that you will have staff changes. There will be leadership changes. So you want to make sure that you have information that you can pass on if there's a new judge coming, that you have that transition period, so you kind of have that warm handoff to let that person know and get to know your participants. And the other thing too is, from a comfort level of your participants, change is hard for everybody. So if all of a sudden, Judge Wahwassuck's gone and, we've got Judge Drent in and they don't know that's coming, then that can be difficult. And so that's something that then if there's going to be a transition, if you can get the new leadership or staff in, and that way they see both, and that makes the transition easier, not only for leadership and staff, but also the participants. So plan ahead for that. And it's important too. And I think that in terms of sustainability and things going on, that you can even codify these things, put it in to have a code section in your tribal codes for healing to wellness courts. And then I hate to use the word institutionalized, but that way you've made it a part of the way you do business. So now, after all these years in northern Minnesota, this is just the way we do business, and it goes to other things. And so, but it's important to plan for that. And it's not that there won't be challenges, but we've been able to overcome all of those because there is that planning ahead, and that when new staff come in, they get that ongoing training. So that's something that's really important. So some of the themes that came out of our project team pilot sites, the big one is conflict. And you know what? It's going to be there. And I mean, that's sort of the nature of the beast. We're court, right? We don't see people that when they're in the highlight of their lives usually. And there's going to be conflict with the participants, maybe. There's conflict between your team members, or can be. There's conflict that we bring just from daily lives. And so it's going to be there no matter how well your team handles it. And so it's really important. It's just like a relationship with anybody that you want to, you have to nurture that. And then when conflict does arise, you're in a lot better position to work through that. If you know each other well, and if you trust each other, and to know, well, if Judge Wahwassuck is saying this, then, there must be a reason that she believes that, but you have to be able to have that open communication, and that keeps your partnership strong. And every chance that you get, like if you can go out, and I talked about attending trainings together, I think that's really an important thing, to be able to spend time together and really strengthen those basic relationships, because then we bring that into our business work and what we do at court and in programs like this. And again, do what you can. I always say that, don't focus on what you can't do. And, it's like, pick one thing. So, I mean, if there's a couple things that you can work on, or one thing that you can agree on, find that and work on that, and stay focused on making that you can. And again, everything that's led up to this now with joint jurisdictional courts is just because, we found something that we could work together on, in spite of all of the awful relationships and things like that between the tribe and the county. There was something that we could agree on with those goals, and say we focused on that, and look what it grew into in the community. I mean, it's truly changed the way things happen around here, and changed the community way beyond anything that we ever anticipated. And we talked about that in balanced and inclusive participation. And I mean, again, everybody, and it doesn't matter what your role is, you're part of that team. And so it's important that people feel that if you have a treatment provider that's coming in to say, you've ordered this, but this is difficult, or we can't do this, and to listen to your service providers and the other people that are at the table, because they're the ones that are doing the on the ground work. And so a lot of times it's really easy to sit back, and then if people don't feel like they can talk and feel like they have a voice at the table, they'll just be quiet and sabotage you. And I mean, and that happens and not just in courts like this, but in a lot of programming. But if people have that, again, when I talk about like creating your vision and your mission, if I've helped build that, that's my mission. And it's important to get everybody looking in the same direction. I know that at least, like I always thought about this. It was like, why can't we all get together and like do all the different programs and like do this one thing, because it's really a good deal. And then you realize that all the different divisions and departments and things, everybody has grants, and part of their grants, you have to develop mission and visions. So as part of the planning process, I showed you the Justice Center. So we brought all the division directors together, and everybody was like, okay, bring your strategic plans. So we started looking at those goals and their missions and their visions and things. And it was like everybody was looking in different directions. So it's no wonder, they all had a different mission, vision, that kind of thing. And some of them were compatible, some weren't. So it's important to have that for your team, so everybody's looking in the same direction, and it'll help it make it a lot easier for you to move in that direction. And again, that agreement to disagree, you know, there are going to be some things that you just don't go there on. And so again, that's, you focus on the things that you can do, and then it will make it a lot more likely that you're able to do the things in the future that you can't do now, because then people will say, oh, okay, this works. And so this worked over here. And so that will transfer. Success breeds success. But there may be things that you just, as part of your communication agreements, you're just not going to go there on that. And reinforcing, again, I can't say this enough about the common goals and common vision, because then your planning team, everybody is looking at the same thing. You want to make sure when you start that everybody has some basic knowledge that they're in the same spot, that they know, for instance, you know, what a healing to wellness court is and kind of the basics there and why you're doing this, because that makes it a lot easier to move forward, because then you can get right into the planning and let that team really make this new thing that they're creating. And then also you do need to have a final decision maker. And I know as judges that, you know, we do talk about this a lot, that, you know, as we ethically, we can't give away our decision-making power and advocate to someone else. But what, you know, normally what we've done is that if the team can't agree on something, then the judges make the decision. And, you know, we thought that when we went into this, we thought, what are we going to do when there's conflict that comes up, or, you know, if we can't reach an agreement on something? And, you know, it was amazing. We found that there really wasn't anything that we didn't agree on. I mean, because we had found that solid foundation. And so we maybe had a little bit of different approach or different ideas, but we were able to come to consensus. But if the team couldn't decide if someone needed a sanction or if someone had to be terminated, then the judges have to be the final decision maker. So you do have that as judges. I think that that's something that a lot of us are uncomfortable giving up that authority to be able to make those decisions, but you do have the ability to be that final decision maker. And patience. And I think that this is, I mean, again, when this gets to that, if you ask the question, be willing to listen to the answer, because a lot of times, you know, we want people to answer in the way we think they should, or, you know, in the manner that we think they should. And I think it's really important to take that time to listen, and this will build trust more than, you know, it's such a key, because if I feel like you're taking the time to listen to what I have to say and my concerns, then yeah, I think I'm going to be a lot more willing to work with you if I feel like I've been heard. And again, your team member needs to understand, everybody that's there, sort of how joint jurisdiction can be applied in different ways, that it's not just the two judges taking the bench together. It's whatever works for you. And that's the ultimate. I think that's the best. And you can really achieve a lot that way, but that might not be what you are ready for in a particular jurisdiction. So it's, you know, adapt and changes as necessary. And there's going to be delays. And the example that I give is Kenai and Kenai in Alaska. They waited after our planning process. It took over a year before they could be operational, or about a year, because it was totally beyond their control. I mean, they had submitted their policy and procedure manual that we put together, and then there were changes in administration, and it sat on somebody's desk. I mean, who knows what happened? But, you know, they didn't give up. They waited, and they were persistent, and just kept with it. And then they were able to finally have things approved and get going. And again, I'll say this again about culture and best practices, because you can blend both. Just don't forget about what we know. And that's why I always give the example about how we know that being engaged in your culture is a protective factor, and that it is healing, and that's a best practice, right? And to be involved with those things and to be able to do that. And so it's being accepted more and more. And so things go from like they're a promising strategy or whatever it is, but don't forget what you know, and you can blend these things. You really can. It's like we had a probation agent that he always said that compassion and accountability are not mutually exclusive. And in a lot of ways, this is kind of like parenting. And especially when you have two judges, because you're there and it's kind of like the kids may try to play off each other, but you show a consistent front, and you may not always agree as parents what should happen. But one of the things that we did, that if there was something that we couldn't decide on, or if it never fails to happen, you'll have a participant in front of you and you've met as a team and you've decided what needed to happen and you have it all planned out. And then they throw a curveball at you and something else has changed when the participant gets in there. Take a break. I mean, that's what we used to do all the time, is to just say, okay, we're going to take a recess for a minute, and then the judges or the team could talk about things. And if it was like one of those final decisions that the judges needed to decide what to do, then we were able to do that. And I'll give you a perfect example of, kind of that mindset and our personal experiences and the way we look at things. When we first started out, there was one of our participants, and he showed up to court with a swastika on his shirt. So as a tribal member. And so Judge Smith was like, the guy hadn't even come up yet for his court appearance, and he was ready to throw him in jail for contempt of court, for, wearing something like that in, or he was upset about it. And I said, wait a minute, we took a break, and I came in, and so I said, talk to him about a little bit that maybe that's not the way he means it, because that symbol was not always what some people associate that with. And so ask the participant. And so, that really was able to open Judge Smith's eyes. He came and asked the guy, and it turns out he was just being a pain. But it's still, it was one of those learning moments. And so you can get a lot of those for your participants and between the judges and your team members. And this one about being realistic about what services you can provide is key. We would love to provide everything for everybody. But I think that especially now when we're dealing with people that have co-occurring disorders and the histories of trauma, that you need to just be realistic about what you can do. You can't do everything. And so there may be some people that are have greater needs than your program can provide. Then we've had participants that way, that we just couldn't do that. But be realistic about what you can do. And I think that's also, it helps to even things out in terms of like not giving one participant more than another one, or that perception there, but just to know what you can do, and don't over promise what you can do, because then you just kind of set yourself up and your participants for failure there. And again, I really do. I think that having a facilitator it does help to get things off the ground, because you can get past a lot of these communication things, and it becomes more of a team approach rather than one person's their pet project. So change is hard. It's like for our participants, and we're talking about the team and getting things off the ground, but change is hard for the participants. So we got to remember that for them when they're struggling, that it's hard for all of us. And we've done things the way we've done them in our own systems, and maybe it doesn't work all the way, and there's changes that need to be made, but we're familiar with it, so we keep doing it. Isn't that the definition of insanity, continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result? But you just got to keep that in mind, that it's not easy, and that again, we are the system. So you really have to take care of yourselves, and that a lot of people that are in the work that we do have their own histories of trauma, and that will come out. And we don't have a lot of it in this, but to learn about secondary trauma and the fact that you're in front of this all the time, and you need to acknowledge that and take care of yourselves, and to realize that you may have planned out everything that you think that is going to happen and that you want to have happen, but those participants, they have their own issues, and you may need to tweak things to meet them where they are. So that's something to keep in mind. Common goals, common goals, common goals. How many times have we heard that? But that's the key. You can look at your strategic plans for the judicial branch and your tribal courts. Anywhere you can find a common goal, look to that and don't give up. And we talked about sort of, how can you do this? And so there's a few different things. And I think certainly Washington Supreme Court Rule 82.5, it provides for that communication between tribal courts and state courts, and it allows transfer. It really opens up the doors for this collaborative justice approach. I really believe that, and that there's, and it may be something too, that as you go forward, that there maybe other changes in court rules that you can seek. I know in Minnesota, we had our Rule 10 for recognition of tribal court orders. There's things like that that you can, when things start to work, if that might be even something that can be expanded in different court rules, and you get the buy-in from your Supreme Court, for judges along the way. And then I think that it makes it a lot easier to say, you know, this is really good that we can transfer and talk about things, but we need a little bit extra here. But I think the fact that this opens the door for state judges and tribal court judges to pick up the phone and talk about these things and to plan together for cases where you have concurrent jurisdiction, it really provides a good foundation to be able to get this work started. And then your tribal state court consortium, really, I mean, you look at what the whole purpose is: expanding communication and collaboration and discussing jurisdictional issues, gaps, developing partnerships. And the tribal court, state court forums, different places have done amazing work to help promote joint jurisdictional courts and to build those relationships between tribal judges and state judges, and to find areas. Again, it may start off with working together on a joint jurisdictional court, but you don't know what that can grow into when those relationships are improved. So I think that this is really one. And I would encourage you, I know that it sounds like you haven't met just because of COVID and things like that, you know, the work there. I would really, really encourage you to use that for that consortium, because those forums are amazing just to get that communication going. And so there may be, you know, one court or two courts that ends up doing a joint jurisdictional court, but other courts will learn from that. And we started in northern Minnesota with our joint jurisdiction courts, and now sort of through our tribal court, state court forum work, other courts are expanding this too, because they've seen it work and been able to have that conversation. And why do we do this when it all gets down to it? I just love this picture anyway, but this is why. I mean, we're doing this for our kids and for generations down the line. It took families and it took us a long time to get where we are now. But the work that you do now, it really can affect future generations and our kids. And so that's why we do this. So, you know, I really encourage you to get out, do something outside yourself. And, you know, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, repair those tears in your community, and to really be able to see what you can do. I was at a conference one time, a long time ago, and it was in this conference room. It was huge. They had the big, both sides open, and there was an opening ceremony, and everybody was all in a big circle for that ceremony. There were so many of us, we were just like this. And there were judges and social workers and probation. I mean, it was everybody. And I got thinking later that if any one of us, no matter what your role was, if anybody had taken one step to the right or to the left, that entire circle would have shifted and everybody's perspective would have been different, because one person took one step. And that's kind of what happened with us with the joint jurisdiction courts in Minnesota. Judge Smith took one step and he said, "Can I get a little help here?" And that's and this is where we are today. There's some additional reading here, and I'm sure that we'll provide this information, but there's a couple of the law review articles that were written, and then some other publications. Tribal Law and Policy Institute has a couple of publications out and new ones that are coming out all the time. In terms of technical assistance, there's the how-to manual that's there. Tribal Law and Policy Institute also provides a lot of technical assistance. And their site, Walking on Common Ground, is a good one. NAICJA is a great resource as well. So there's lots of help that's out there if you ask. And you know, I would also look to other judges that are doing this as a resource. You may know some of them, so you know, ask them. And then there's a new TLPI publication that needs assessment for joint jurisdiction courts that was just released. So that's another good resource to see what's happening with the other joint jurisdiction courts. So I'm going to leave it with this. So when my son was 9, you saw that picture at the beginning of him smudging off the Supreme Court justice. So when he was 9 and I was just starting, he's 23 now, when I was just starting to go out to present on these joint jurisdiction courts, I was obsessing over my PowerPoint or whatever, and we're at the dinner table and he's like, "Mom, what are you worried about?" I said, "Well, you know, you wouldn't understand because it's really complicated. I'm trying to get these people to work together. They don't know each other." And he said, "It's easy. You don't need to do all that." And I was like, "Okay, what would you do?" And he said, first of all, he said, "Tell them to be proud of who you are, because we're different. We all should be proud of who we are." And then he said, "Open your minds." Because again, we look down, we just see what we see. So they got to open their minds. And then he said, learn each other. And I'm, of course, trying to correct his grammar. I said, don't you mean learn about someone or learn from them? He said, nope. He said, I can learn about something from watching TV or reading a book. To learn somebody, you got to look them in the eye. And then his last piece of advice was, don't be afraid. And this advice has guided all of the work that we've done in any relationships. And so I'll leave you with that piece of advice and turn it back over and open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Judge Wahwassuck. We kind of had a theme, I would say, of the questions that had been asked. And it's kind of all around, how would you do a joint jurisdiction court with either a tribe that's geographically distant or with multiple tribes if you have a lot of tribes that you see coming into your court system?
Well, I think certainly in the days of COVID, we're a lot more familiar with using technology. And I think that especially when we have large geographical distances, that's one way to link up the courts, especially if you're having ongoing meetings, because it does. I mean, it involves travel for all of your team members to get there. And so you can utilize technology to be able to do that. And I think certainly if if a single tribe doesn't feel like they can do this all on their own to create their own court, I saw that, like you said, the question with doing a consortia or getting more than one together, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think that expands things if you can be able to do that. I think it's basically the same concept. I think that if you were going to have a consortia of tribes, I think obviously you want one tribal judge to be whoever's going to do that, because you don't need, if you have 4 tribes that are going to be involved, you don't want 4 separate judges. I think the consistency, I think that can be lacking there. And the other thing too is that your participants will play you off and just like kids do their parents. And so you don't want a different judge in there all the time, because they it's like the substitute teacher. Oh, well, they let us do this all the time. And so that, to limit it to a point, who your point person is to be the tribal judge. Oh, you're on mute.
I know we have about 9 minutes left. Thank you so much, Judge Wahwassuck. We will share the PowerPoint presentations that we've done today, as well as some of the resources that have been listed out on the Wix site. We want to thank you for your questions. If you have follow-up questions or need any further information, NAICJA is here for you. We will share our contact information. Judge Wahwassuck has kindly shared her contact information. If you'd like to complete the evaluation, we appreciate your participation in this training. By signing up for this training, you've already expressed an interest in joint jurisdiction courts. And so we already have a common ground to start from. NAICJA would like to thank the Tulalip Tribal Court and Chief Judge Drent for asking us to assist with this training, and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families for the grant to provide this training. And also thank you to Judge Wahwassuck for being willing to share her knowledge and her time. I do think she is the goddess of joint jurisdiction courts, and so we really appreciate that she's willing to share with us today. If anyone else has a question, we do have about 8 minutes left. Otherwise, I'll leave it up to Judge Drent to close us out.
I have a question. Will this presentation be available on NAICJA's YouTube channel?
Yes.
Okay.
I would just encourage everyone. It's, I know how busy you are. It's like we all are. I feel like everyone's just sort of skimming the surface and putting out fires, but it's the reward that comes from doing this is, I can't even explain to you, to see the changes in people and to know that you have created something different, because I think that we all know we can do better. And it's like that we learned that the tribal system and the state system, neither one of them, we have the same goals, but neither one of us quite got there. It's kind of like the Iditarod sled race, right? It's, in Alaska, it's like we're all going to the same finish line. So what we've done is just hooked up our dogs and sleds. And so it's, and that's kind of the way it is. And so no one's given up anything. And I would really encourage you to reach out. I'm always available as a resource if anybody has questions. And I'm really honored to have had the chance to be with you today.
Judge Strand, I don't see any other questions coming through. If you'd just like to close us out, we'll give everyone a few minutes of their time back today.
Okay, I'm no longer muted. Okay, so this has just been such an amazing presentation. Please join me in thanking Judge Korey Wahwassuck and the NAICJA team, Johanna Farmer, Mary Rodriguez, and Elton Nasswood for an informative and engaging presentation. It will be available on NAICJA's YouTube channel in the near future. So also, just as a reminder, take a moment to complete the evaluation. We want to make sure that the resources we provided would be helpful to you in the future. We also wanted to extend our appreciation to the Office of Juvenile Justice and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families for the funding for this particular training. And then I want to extend my appreciation to all of you for attending this informational session, for taking the time and for spending your Friday morning with us. We hope that you'll take this information and use it to improve services to your communities and to open the door to collaboration between all our jurisdictions. So once again, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend and please stay safe and healthy.